Alrighty, okay. So welcome to episode 10, which is kind of a mini milestone for me because although 10 is, not 1,000, it's still 10. And I talked in the beginning of this podcast in one of the first or second episodes about how over the last, 10 years, I've been trying to do creative things. I start, I stop, I start, I stop. And yeah, I'm just proud of the fact that I started and I actually got to episode 10. That's a little mini milestone for me right there. And I just thought this was a good time for just a little reset, maybe a little recap of what we've talked about here and then where we're going to go from here. Because, in general, this has been a very, very fun thing to do. I've really enjoyed coming up with these episode topics, learning kind of. I don't really know. I was telling Marcus, he was like, oh, well, you must feel like you're learning a lot. And I was like, honestly, like in terms of the editing. And yeah, I do all of the editing, but I don't know if I really feel like I'm learning new skills with the editing, but more of I'm doing the exact same thing every time and trying not to click anything else because I'm worried it'll mess it all up. So I'm more of like repeating the same process week by week, but it is much faster now at this point. So I am learning in a way. But yeah, it's just been really fun to have this kind of outlet to be able to do long form content on and really speak my mind. I had always been hesitant to do short form content just because I have so much to say and I feel like I needed a bigger space to be able to do that in. So that really is what this podcast has been. And it's been so fun to, learn how to create a podcast outline and do all the editing and the setup and everything and, uploading it to YouTube and all of the things. So it's been really like a good experience. I'm very proud of the consistency, as I said, but maybe the growth, not as much. Honestly, I don't know who listens to this. I have some stats, but I think I would kind of expect at least like I kind of guess 100% of my listeners are friends or family. So if you are if you don't know me from real life, would love to hear from you because currently my hypothesis is people are listening because they know me. And I haven't reached really anybody else just yet. Although, this is more my hobby and I haven't really done an amazing job at promoting this. But, growth wise, maybe not exactly, outstanding, but I'm not too worried about that. That's okay. This is just the beginning. But the reason why I want to do a mini reset today is because I sat down to record, was it last week's? It might've been last week's episode. And I was like, no. Oh yeah. Cause last week I had to redo the episode. And I have been kind of structuring my ideas into themes. And so I have laid out actually 20 to 30 episode themes or episode plans. And each episode is kind of thematically driven. So for example, I talked about friendships in your 20s, what no one tells you about moving abroad, etc. So each episode has kind of been like a thought. But what happened, especially last week and then now this week, where I was like, all right, I think we might need to go back to the drawing board, is that sometimes when I've pre-planned and I have this structure, but it has no relevance, or it does have relevance, but it's not, the main thing that's going on for me right now that I could really talk about, you can really tell in my delivery and my enthusiasm for what I'm talking about. And so it's just like, it's not translating well. So I kind of need to do a little reset and I wanted to take y'all in on that with me. And we're going to first start off by just talking about my career and where I'm at with that right now, because I did bring up this pretty big topic 2 episodes ago. And I said I was going to keep y'all updated and maybe that would be like fun to kind of let you in on, where my head is at and how that process is going. So I thought we'd just touch on that first before going into just a little bit on where I see this podcast going. Just a spoiler alert, like not anything major is changing, more of just the way that I'm going to structure things likely. But yeah, career-wise, so not much has changed. I honestly where my head is at now is, yeah, I don't know. Great. But I think I'm still in a similar place to where I was 2 weeks ago when I talked about this for the first time, where I am excited to focus on my content creation for the time being. And I'm just very thankful that I am in a situation where I have time because of the severance package that I was given. And then also because on top of that, Marcus's job gives us that flexibility. So I really am leaning into the content creation side of stuff and trying to just give myself some direction and just start at least heading down that path and seeing where it goes and where I can go with it. So that's where I'm at least for now, is just getting more into the content creation, both, the podcasts and then also expanding my short form content. But once again, like, I'm still at the same time just keeping an eye on the jobs that are available around me, but I am definitely not going full in on that at this time. I am more going full in on, just having fun and exploring the content creation side of stuff. And then at the same time, like, spending a little bit of time on LinkedIn looking at jobs that pop up, but I'm definitely not getting serious about it just yet. And I don't know when I will. I don't know at what point I will decide that that's like either what I want to do or what I need to do, depending on how long I try to do this. And it's also, I will say, I don't think that suddenly I'm going to blow up overnight and be able to do content creation in terms of my podcast and my social media just taking off and that's my full-time job. I'm definitely not under that impression that within the next couple months that could ever happen. It's more of whether I also want to, go this route, but then supplement it with trying out user-generated content, and which is where I could actually then potentially make some money, and then maybe any other freelance or side gigs, just with the skills that I have. And I am registered as a freelancer here in Finland, so I could go do these things. It's just how much time do I want to dedicate to, focusing on my content creation while also balancing it with then, really trying to go in with the self-employment and freelancing and finding gigs that will actually bring in some money at this time. So I'm still just trying to kind of figure it all out, balance everything, but I feel so busy. I don't know that I feel like an accomplished busy. I haven't really given myself goals or markers of like what means that I'm moving in the right direction. So I think right now I feel very like I'm just like kind of floating, even though I know that I am making progress because I am able to edit podcast episodes faster. And I do have a bunch of ideas for the short form content that I'm doing. But I just need to like spend some time to write it down and be really intentional about making sure that I feel good in this time, rather than looking back and realizing like I felt a lot of stress because I didn't give myself good direction. Because I think that can easily happen, especially for me when I don't have any sort of structure or things that I actually have to do. I have a lot of things that I like tell myself I have to do, but of course they're all just from my, what I want to get done, and not, actually like somebody else who's waiting on me because I'm getting paid for some work. So that's just a little update career-wise. If you are in Helsinki and you're listening to this and you need someone to do some freelancer work for you, I might be your gal. Because as I said, I'm pretty flexible right now. But with that in mind, just the idea of me going more in on the content creation, I feel like this kind of led to this moment on the podcast where now I was like, whoa, like what am I doing? Because when I really started this podcast, I hadn't started or really even envisioned myself starting a TikTok and an Instagram and like really trying to grow those platforms. And now I have. So I started to come up with, the pillars of my content and what kind of things I want to talk about, all very much geared towards my, like when I was thinking of the kind of content that I'm going to post on my Instagram and TikTok. And then it started kind of getting this like blurry line of like, how does the podcast fit into all of this? I was very focused on the short form content. And then it got to the last 2 weeks where then I was like getting to podcast recording day. And I was like, what am I talking about today? I would look at my notes and I would see, the theme that I was supposed to talk about that day. And it felt so removed from what was actually like my focus in life right then and what I was actually thinking about. So to sit down and all of a sudden be like, friendships in your 20s, was just kind of like there was a disconnect there. I love the podcast because it's the space where I get to expand on my thoughts and I get to put full thoughts out into the universe, versus short form content is made to, be consumed within the first 3 seconds. You need to grab attention. Everything that you do has to be so curated to the algorithm, versus the podcast is my place to be and say what I want. So at least I knew, like, I don't want to give up on the podcast, but what is it doing? How does it look? And how does it live beside the short form stuff that I also know I need to focus on at this time? And that's when I just stepped back and I was like, okay, what am I doing? How is this stuff going to merge? How is it going to complement each other? And what am I doing here? And I'll be honest, that came with a moment of me being like, well, crap, is the podcast for me at this point? And I think I even voiced that to Marcus one point, and he was like, I think you should do it. I think you should keep doing it. And I really appreciate that because I know I want to keep doing this. It's just, I got a little bit overwhelmed when I started looking at what I want to do on one platform and then on the other platform, and trying to combine it all into like kind of an ecosystem that makes sense. The main realization for me when it came to this podcast was I need ideas to stem from real life, not from planned themes. And although I love and still want my themes to be what they have been, I think that they will naturally come up on a week by week basis just by living and being a woman in my late 20s, versus, having a plan for on November 21st, I'm going to talk about what I wish I knew in my 20s. So kind of flipping the script on having, my content pillars, the things that I want to focus on, and looking at my list and being like, okay, this happened this week that is so relevant to the things that I want to speak on the podcast. That then took me back to the drawing board of like, okay, so how am I going to structure? I need structure. I need some sort of direction and like confidence that every week I will have stuff to say. But rather than trying the approach that I've been trying, which is having these preset themes, I then instead went back and just kind of defined the pillars of my content. Like, what do I even talk about on the podcast? What do I want to put out there? What kind of community do I want to grow? And from real life is where I'm going to grab those snippets from to be able to bring into the podcast in a way that hopefully will bring a lot more light to me and then to the listeners, to y'all too, because you can actually feel that I have energy talking about the things that I'm talking about. I'll just quickly touch on the 3 pillars that I decided on, not to go into depth on them, but just to give a little bit of an understanding of like where my content is going to grow from here. Which first one is life as it's happening. So presence, everyday moments, how to live in the now, and how I'm doing that on a week by week basis. Becoming, so growth, identity, the in progressness of me. So that might even be my career and how that's progressing as an example. And then finally, love and home. So connection, belonging, relationships. So none of these things I hope sound super far off from the things that I have been talking about. I still imagine this podcast for a woman in their late 20s, early 30s, wanting to just talk about the realness of life, maybe life transitions, identity at this stage in life, really trying to live where you're living, maybe being uncertain about some stuff. So the main themes of what I'm talking about and what I have been talking about this whole time aren't going to change. So this is a whole lot of nothing. Why are we talking about this episode? Just kidding. This is just an update on, like where my mind is at, which I think is also part of the growth and part of the process, which is why I wanted to actually do an entire, it's going to be a short episode today, but that is why I wanted to talk about it today on the podcast, so that, it's also, I think that this is also part of, the theme of just being an adult who is figuring stuff out. And that's now me bringing y'all in on my like creative process, and then like where my brain is at and how I can get super overwhelmed and then maybe want to quit. But no, I'm going to keep going, and just like bringing y'all into where I am right now as I live it. So what all of this means is hopefully that I will just be showing up every week with a little bit more energy and heart and excitement about what I am going to be talking about. And from the listener perspective, it might be a little bit more grounded in current stories of stuff that I'm experiencing and how that ties into the bigger theme of just growing at this stage in life and what it is to live at this stage of life where I'm at right now and where you might be too. So that's really it. And I do just want to say thank y'all for, even if you are my friends and my family, for listening, just to see that there have been listeners, as I said, even if they aren't outsiders yet, I don't know. But just having people show up and actually listen, even if it's out of obligation because y'all love me, I really appreciate it. It has been really fun to have started this and created this space for myself to have this creative outlet and talk about the things I've always wanted to talk about. So yeah, just thank you for being here. Thank you if you're listening right now. And yeah, I guess this would be a good time to kind of ask that if you're listening and you like this podcast, to share it with your friends, leave a comment, leave a review, because that will all help get this podcast just a little bit more out there, hopefully. But yeah, hope y'all have a good rest of your week, and I will see you next week.